Hello and welcome. Welcome to Strategies to Mitigate the Challenges of a HyFlex Instruction. My name is Dr. Gina Riley, and myself and my amazing colleague Kenny Hirschman will be presenting. We are from CUNY Hunter College at the Hunter School of Education. So, most of us at this conference know the benefits of HyFlex instruction. It allows learning to happen everywhere and anywhere. It provides choice and personalization in learning, and it provides universal design for learning. It's friendly and it's accessible to all students. We also know that there are many challenges to HyFlex instruction. This includes physical and virtual space challenges, pedagogical challenges, technological challenges, as well as student challenges. And so throughout this presentation, we will be going through all of these different challenges and also how to mitigate them. In terms of physical and virtual space challenges, there's always the classroom size and layout challenge. So, is the HyFlex classroom that you utilize conducive to HyFlex teaching and learning? I've taught HyFlex in very large spaces. I've taught HyFlex in very small spaces. I, of course, prefer the larger spaces that have updated tech, but we all know that we can also do HyFlex in a very low budget, low space way. But just noting those physical challenges is really important. There's also the challenge of acoustics and background noise. Schools and colleges and universities tend to be very active places. And so sometimes, if there is too much noise in a background of a classroom, it does affect the HyFlex experience. And it's the same with lighting. In terms of virtual participant location and virtual representation, right? What does your virtual classroom look like? What does that virtual space looks like? I know in my virtual classroom, I always ask students to have cameras on. I want everyone to be really active and participatory. I really want to create a very active virtual classroom culture, but that virtual space is really important. It's also important to note that our students are logging into their virtual spaces from many different places. It might be a busy home, it might be a cafe, it might be an airport. And, those kinds of things does affect your engagement and interaction in class. The learning management system that you participate in is also affecting HyFlex and can be challenging in a multitude of ways. I know everyone has their ideal like async learning management system and their ideal sync learning management system, and that may or may not be the space that your college or university or school uses. And so just thinking about that in terms of challenge and how it affects instructors as well as students. Then there's technology challenges. Some of us are working in really high tech, amazing HyFlex spaces, and other of us are working with portable cameras and tripods. And so thinking about the availability of technology is really important. The telepresence for online students, right? Like, can they put their cameras on? Can we see them and hear them well? Is really important. There's also a learning curve to HyFlex instruction. I often don't think it's something that you can do right away. I think it's something that you need to get used to. You need to also get used to, as an instructor, really presenting to both your all your students, your in-person students, your sync students in the room, as well as your async students. And you want them to have the same equitable quality of experience. And so there's that learning curve to learn how to be a really great HyFlex instructor. And when we think about that, we often think of like, okay, how do we do group work in HyFlex? And I know lots of people like mixed groups and they like students to bring their laptop. I've always done like my in-person students are in a small group. My Zoom students are in a or multiple small groups. And so just thinking about how that affects our instruction and how that affects classroom culture as a whole. There's the security and maintenance challenge. If you're recording lectures, where does that lecture go? Is that lecture ever private? In this digital age, we always wonder about private and personal spaces. And then there's the async tools. As an instructor, are you using and do you know how to use your async tools well? In terms of pedagogical challenges, we talked a little bit about group interaction and group instruction, but it is really something to think about. We want our classrooms to be collaborative spaces. And so we want that like hearty group instruction. We want everyone to feel like they are interacting in a whole classroom space and not just like our async students are interacting with each other. Our sync students only interact with each other. Our in-person students only interact with each other. So how do we mitigate that? How do we create equitable whole spaces? There's also the divided attention in both the instructor and student perspective. So when you think about being an instructor of HyFlex, your attention is divided probably three ways: by what you're lecturing about, by your in-person students who might be asking questions and curious about things, as well as your online or virtual students who might be asking questions about and curious about things. If there's ever any technological issues, that is also sort of a way, like, you have to divide your attention, right? You're trying to mitigate any technological issues. It wouldn't be the first time that my laptop battery has gone out during a HyFlex class. So things like that do divide our attention and do affect the HyFlex experience. There's also that student engagement piece, right? How do we create high engagement in a HyFlex classroom? How do we create equitable engagement in the HyFlex classroom? I know if you work at a college and university and even in a P12 space, instructor workload has been a question. If instructors are providing an async, sync, and in-person space, how much preparation does that actually take? How much do people have to actually prepare? And so there is that workload question, as well as the cognitive overload question. HyFlex does take a lot of brain work. It takes a lot of physical work sometimes, especially if you're utilizing technology, but it also takes a lot of brain work on both the instructor and student perspective because there is so much going on in that classroom. So how do we provide that optimal experience while knowing that it's going to be a challenge? Just like instructors get some sort of cognitive overload by the fact that they have in-person and virtual students in the classroom. There's also the cognitive overload of students who have to attend to both modalities within that classroom as well as the instructor. So that can sometimes be overwhelming, and I think it's really important to just acknowledge that up front. There's also a lot of choice involved in HyFlex. There's, the async choice, the sync choice, and the in-person choice. And it's sort of, I always think it's a challenge if students aren't well prepared to make the choice that is right for them. And so in order to mitigate this challenge, I always think that students should really think about, like, what is the way I truly learn best? Am I truly more of an in-person learner? Am I a fantastic async? Can I participate in a way that I want to asynchronously? Students really have to know themselves. And I think that that's sometimes a challenge for all of us, whether kids or adults. There's that student to student piece that I think is really important, not only to create classroom culture, but also for students to really know each other. How do students get to know each other in a very divided online space? How do students get to collaborate with each other in a divided online space? And then there's instructor proficiency. So are instructors trained well on HyFlex instruction? Can they deal with the challenges that come with it, knowing all the awesome benefits that come with it? I really do think it's a learned process. I remember my first HyFlex class years ago and me being super nervous about it, but also me not knowing like what could go wrong. Now I know, right after teaching HyFlex for years and years, what could go wrong, how I could mitigate that challenge, how I can support all students, how I can create a HyFlex classroom culture. And I think that is really helpful. So to mitigate challenges, I think all instructors, whether P12 or higher ed instructors, need to start planning early. You need to start thinking about your HyFlex class. You need to start thinking about the technology needs of your HyFlex class. I am so lucky to work with my incredible colleague who is first author on this piece, Kenny Hirschman. He has been such a great support technology-wise in terms of really just having me think about planning as well as purposeful instruction. Talking about Kenny, like consulting with your instructional designer and technologist is a really important part of being a good HyFlex instructor. There may be things you haven't tried before, even if you're an experienced HyFlex instructor that you want to do. And that's where your instructional designers and technologists come in. I feel like it's always helpful to design my asynchronous module first. I think I put that up every Sunday, and I think it helps all my students. It just creates a more equitable classroom. I have in-person students that also utilize the asynchronous module either for like deeper learning or to review what they might have missed in class. I personally love HyFlex. I'm a special educator, so I personally love HyFlex because of its universal design for learning. Issue. I think it's like a fantastic, fantastic way to form a classroom that reaches all learners in terms of accessibility and interaction and engagement. You have all learners, no matter what their circumstance or what their space, able to participate in a classroom. And in 2023, that is a huge thing. It gives opportunities for people who may not have the opportunities to participate in learning and teaching. And I really think that that is the great benefit of HyFlex. I think it's also important when you're thinking about your physical space to view your classroom in advance and decide on seating arrangement, decide on where, if you're using a camera with a tripod, like where that camera is. It's just important to scope out any space. And I think that especially in terms of HyFlex spaces. You want to be able to participate in any professional developments or trainings that your school does. I know we at the Hunter School of Education are so blessed. We have a wonderful technology support specialist. We have a wonderful Frankfurt Center that Kenny directs. We have our amazing ASSERT team, which is our teaching and learning center, and they have HyFlex community conversations. They have opportunities to really like be in a HyFlex classroom and test it out. But it's really important as a HyFlex instructor to participate in those trainings, even if you are more advanced in your learnings, to know those available supports. I think it's also essential to set expectations, both for students and for yourself as a HyFlex instructor. Are you going to give the course in 3 modalities? Are you going to give the course in 2 modalities? Do your students know what the definition of HyFlex is? Do they know what they're getting into? Do they know what they're getting involved in? Setting expectations is really important. I spend the first class, pretty much the majority of the first class in all of my HyFlex classrooms, thinking about and looking at and talking with students about the HyFlex experience. So I really think it's important that students know what HyFlex is, that they know what to expect. And I also think that like being clear and consistent and comprehensive is really important. I always want to be clear in my instruction, within my syllabi, in my engagement with students, in my interactions with students. I also think it's really essential to be transparent about the HyFlex experience, to really know what it means, to really tell students like, hey, this is HyFlex. We are engaging in 3 modalities. There may be glitches. Be patient with me, and I will be as patient and understanding with you. But also knowing and talking to students about the benefit of being able to access class in different modalities. I think students really latch on to that. If they know that an instructor or a teacher is really trying to give choice, to give universal design, they are always all for that. And so just thinking about that. I am a big keep it simple person. So my weeks in a HyFlex classroom basically have the same structure. And that's something I'm really proud of. That's something my students comment on. Like, we always knew what to expect. We knew that she was going to put her async module up on Sundays. We knew that she was going to grade our work on the following Saturday. We knew that she was going to be there for us throughout this experience. And so just thinking about like, what are your basic structures? Just like when you're designing a fully online course. Also, you want to plan. You want to really think about how to engage all students in a HyFlex structure and how that will work out. I always talk about my roomies and my Zoomies, my people in the room and my people on Zoom. I also really talk about my async students and involve them in the conversation and say to my roomies and Zoomies, hey, like, take a look at this posting by your classmate who's attending asynchronously because it really like helps to clarify or understand. So I want to bring everyone in the HyFlex classroom, and I think that's super important. In terms of Kenny and my future research, we are doing a CUNY-wide faculty survey on the HyFlex experience at CUNY, something we're really excited about. We're also going to do a student survey about the HyFlex experience for students. I always love, as someone who has taught HyFlex for a while now, talking about best practices in HyFlex. And I am especially interested in and have written about and presented about HyFlex and universal design for learning and equity. So again, Kenny and I are so excited about this CUNY-wide faculty survey. We think it'll be a really insightful sort of piece for the field. And this article on mitigating the challenges of HyFlex was also published in Cite Proceedings. So we are happy to link this article into our materials. And here are references. And we thank you all so very much for listening and for being part of this amazing conference.